Well, I expected to go into this, freaking out over the idea of fighting legendary Pokemon with your bare hands, but instead, this turned into a Bible study. Welcome to Shadow of the Colossus, one of the most overwhelmingly critically acclaimed video games of all time. Back in the day, it was truly a testament to the idea that video games should be considered an art form just as much as any other form of media. But it by no means was perfect. In fact, when I first played Shadow of the Colossus, I wasn't the biggest fan. Get up there, fucker! Get up! Stop going so slow! Get up! Oh my god, these fucking controls. Get up! I hated it. Okay, hate, yeah, that might be a little bit of a strong word, but it was really frustrating at times. I'll elaborate in a minute, but first I need to thank all of you for your comments on my review of the Portal games. Be sure to leave a comment to be featured in the next video, and a colossal thank you to my patrons Stin, Dotman, Jesse, Brian, Angel, the Foe 3, and Papa Noob 345. And just one more thing, if you want to see an alternate scene that I decided to scrap from the main video, then be sure to stick around to the very end. The game begins as you see a young man named Wander and... Wander? Oh, that's unfortunate. Wander and his horse Aggro venturing through the night towards the Forbidden Lands. Of course, it goes without saying, this game is mind-numbingly stunning. The PS4 remake is absolutely sublime.
It's beautiful!
It turns out it's not just you and your trusty steed heading here, but you've also brought a deceased girl to this temple, in the hopes of resurrecting her after she was sacrificed because of her cursed fate. She was born a Phillies fan. At least we beat the Braves, right? Oh my god. At least we beat the Braves, right? To bring her back, it'll take the help of Dormin, a mysterious entity with the power to raise the dead. But it isn't as easy as asking nicely, because in order for Dormin to bring your girl back to life, you have to destroy these 16 idols. And to do that, you have to slay the 16 Colossi that reside in these Forbidden Lands, who act as incarnations of these idols. And that's it. It's a very simple game. From my understanding, the PS4 remake added some more collectibles and other tiny little changes from the PS2 version, but nonetheless, all you really do is travel throughout these barren lands in search of the Colossi you're meant to subdue. At first glance, all this empty space may have you thinking, God, this is boring! And you'd be a little bit right, but that's the point. Besides a few lizards and hawks here and there... Wait, no, I already did that. Life is not meant to exist here. These are sacred lands cut off from the rest of the world with the sole purpose of hosting these giant abominations, never to be bothered or interacted with in any way, which makes it all the more tragic when you hunt them down and slaughter them one by one when they're just minding their business. If you wanted to say all this empty space was boring and say things like, where's the other smaller enemies to kill? Where's all the treasure and weapons to find? Where are NPCs to talk to? If the lack of that isn't fun to you, I'd understand, but if you want that, there are hundreds of other games that can scratch that itch for you. Shadow of the Colossus' stripped down nature is what makes it so intriguing. The atmosphere is absolutely hypnotizing. It truly feels otherworldly or like another dimension. There's an ethereal sense to it. It's almost uncanny, but in an appealing way, because while being so beautiful, it's also so desolate, empty, unnatural, and most of all, so lonely. Not to mention, the only times you'll hear music is when you're in the heat of battle. And all the time you take to travel to each Colossus, which can take a while, there's nothing but the ambient sounds of the forest or the desert or wherever you find yourself. Just about nothing but silence. Your thoughts are really the only thing you can hear. It gives you a lot of time to think about what exactly you're doing. I mean, all we know is you just barged your way into these forbidden lands and are marching around killing these seemingly innocent Colossi one by one. Is it right? Are we justified in doing this? Everything in Shadow of the Colossus is left up to your imagination, and everything is left up to your interpretation. There's very little info given as to who these people are, who those people are who show up later, or whatever the hell Dormin even is.
Hello, you're Dormin.
Is Dormin evil? Are they evil? Am I evil? You're given the bare minimum and your mind is left to fill in the rest, and I'll get to all that once we get to the ending, but in the meantime, we gotta go over how this actually plays. And well, it has its problems. So here's how this is gonna go. I'm gonna talk about all the Colossi from worst to best. That way I can get most of my bitching out of the way pretty much immediately, and then I can just slurp on this game's knob for the rest of the video. Got it? Cool. Now, with that said, fuck Phaedra! Phaedra is the 4th Colossus and easily the worst fight of the entire game. And let me tell you why. Phaedra requires you to lure him towards these tunnels with your arrows, and when you shoot them, you have to hurry up and run out another one of the tunnels, and jump on Phaedra's back while he's looking through the tunnel you just fired an arrow out of. Sounds like a solid concept on paper, but what actually ends up happening is the dumb, stupid animal just doesn't register anything you do to provoke it 99% of the time, leaving it aimlessly pursuing you or aimlessly doing nothing at all as you plead for it to just bend over already. Shut up, I know what I said. I had the right idea, but I thought I didn't because for like half an hour my plan wasn't working. But really that's just because the AI behind this fight is so dysfunctional. While we're at it, fuck you, Sologia, make me a stuffed crust. Look, part of me would feel kind of bad that this beast is scared of a little fire, but any sympathy I had for this guy was gone considering how annoying he is with the constant charging and ramming into stuff. Then at the end trying to deal the finishing blows was infuriating because he would not stand still for even half a second. Just all around insufferable. Luckily, these two are just so below all the other Colossi that things will be getting a lot more positive from here on out. The second Colossus Quadratus is a mammoth-like beast which teaches you the fundamentals of your bow. It also reinforces how horrible the climbing controls can be. There's honestly not much else to say about this one. It's really simple since it is only the second Colossus after all. However, this Minotaur-like beast Valus, I could gush over all day. He's the first Colossus you encounter, and you never forget your first time. He just skulks around, and this is where the ambiguity and mystique of Shadow of the Colossus, the fear of the unknown, worked so well for me. I was terrified to confront this thing. I had no idea if it wanted to kill me, or how I was even supposed to go about killing it. Should I try shooting at it? Should I try climbing to a better vantage point? It's really up to you to figure it out. I at one point even got so scared that I just ran away, hoping I could start sniping it from below the cliffside. No, that's not what you do. What you're supposed to do is climb up its hairy, unkempt legs, which is a perfect transition for today's video sponsor, Manscaped. Valus, of course, teaches you the general rules you can expect to follow when dealing with future Colossi. Climb up them and use your sword to strike weak points to open opportunities to strike other, weaker, weak points. Until they die. Oh, and pro tip, remember to actually take out your sword, unlike my dumbass waving around a bow like a bozo. Just don't make these fights any more difficult than they need to be, because on your first rodeo, they can get very stressful. The tension you feel as you hold on for dear life as the Colossus flails to shake you off and the phenomenal music swells, the spectacle of it all and the emotion and sense of desperation it pulls out of you is really remarkable. The mere prospect of overcoming these seemingly insurmountable creatures is an exciting one, but it's also the sluggish and heavy controls that add to the drama, creating a realistic weight to the action. Heavy, sluggish controls in isolation are usually a bad thing. In fact, it's what pissed me off for a lot of my first playthrough. But it comes down to the context behind the controls being the way they are that makes what would otherwise be horrible controls good. The pure resistance you feel in maneuvering around adds to the triumph you feel when you bring down these massive beasts, and Valus is the first of many. Climbing up the Colossi is always a good time, but how about diving down to get them? Sadly, that was the best segue I could think of. Hydrus is the first aquatic Colossus you'll take on, and he's a bit of a handful. You have to be your own live bait, luring him up to the surface and then latching onto his tail when the time is right. Once you make the climb aboard, you have to avoid being waterboarded as he wiggles his way up and down, while you have to take out his antennas? One by one until you stab him in the head. Another brilliant battle. Next up on our list, we've got the Colossus Cenobia, and he's a brilliant one as well. Which may be surprising to hear considering how very similar both in appearance and even in its approach Cenobia is to Sologia, but hear me out. This fight uses your platforming skills, making you traverse pillars and whatnot, baiting the beast into knocking them down as you gradually lure it to its doom. Eventually, you make it all the way back to the beginning of the area where you first entered, tricking the dumb, stupid animal into collapsing a ton of debris onto itself, exposing exposing its back and killing it. This was a really good battle, though like I said, it's also pretty similar to Celosia. There's tons of other Colossi that were intended to make it into this game, and just talking about those alone would probably add another 15 minutes to this video. I believe the long-standing idea was that there was going to be 24 Colossi, but there was even as high as 48 imagined at one point for this game. Some of my favorites that were pretty close to making the cut though were the Devil, the Phoenix, the Spider. And if it were up to me, I think I would have swapped in one of those for Celosia to mix things up a bit more. Pelagia does a good job standing out though, as it's the only other aquatic Colossus, where you have to swim around to its back and climb up its head where you smash in its crown? To steer it towards these higher platforms. Once up there, you're then able to jump onto the belly of the beast and give it some stabbies, and repeat the process until the poor fella perishes. Now, as far as discourse I've seen online, Bazaron seems to be regarded as one of the worst Colossi, but for me, I thought he was actually pretty cool. It seems a lot of people find his fireballing very annoying, which is understandable, but luckily that never gave me too much trouble. It was all the waiting around for these geysers to finally fire up that was more frustrating for me than anything, but even then, any grievances I had with this guy paled in comparison to ones like Phaedra or Celosia. Having to shoot his feet out from underneath him, then rush to climb up the other side of his body, while also trying to maintain your balance as he struggles to get back to his feet, was easily one of the most tense moments of any of the Colossi battles for me, which made the satisfaction of triumphing over him at the end all the sweeter. Barba's another extremely satisfying Colossus to overcome. Is he as complex as a lot of the other Colossi I've mentioned so far? Honestly, no, he's pretty easy. In fact, he's a lot like Valis, but now just in a cave. Unlike Valis, though, instead of just
Standing there, menacingly!
He's very hostile, wildly swinging and stomping, destroying everything in his path. As you reach the end of the cave, you're able to find some cover here, and as the beast bends down to scope things out, you're able to grasp onto its beard and subsequently begin your attack. Again, it's very simple. I recognize that a lot of the battles I mentioned before this are a lot more thought-provoking, but sometimes you just gotta be able to mindlessly beat the shit out of these guys. It's still fun. The second to last Colossus, Argus, is another one that generally seems to divide the fandom, but I really liked him. I was expecting to hate him because I heard that this fight is super tedious, but I've had way more tedious encounters in this game. You have to get him to slam onto these slabs and then make your way up the wall to get him to knock these pillars out. Then you have to get him to take this bridge out. Then you have to stab him a ton and also get him to drop his sword. And finally, you have to then stab the last weak spot on the palm of his hand where his sword was. It sounds like it is, because it's a lot, but it never felt tedious to me. The controls definitely tripped me up towards the end, trying to jump into his hand, because it's always the jumping that sucks ass in this game, but other than that, this fight was really great. The final Colossus, Malice, is easily the most hostile, formidable, and possibly annoying Colossus, even if it's not entirely his fault and it's more so just the trek to getting here. In fact, the first time I got to this final boss, it made me want to take a bath in a deep fryer, but now that I'm no longer blinded by rage from this game and only blinded by my rage towards the Phillies, how did you fucking lose? I've come around and I really appreciate Malice now, even if this is where aggro dies. Oh, aggro, step forward, forward, forward! Aggro, what the? Why? No! So to get to this guy, you have to take a series of underground tunnels before scaling its metallic exterior. From there, you have to climb into its hand, move up to its shoulder, jump to its other arm to snipe another weak point from there, and then you can finally climb to its head. Also, pro tip, for real this time, make sure you stab him anywhere on his hand as soon as you get the chance so he stops flailing around. Took me way too long into this fight to even think to try that. Beyond that though, even just trying to make the jump to his shoulder, I fell all the way back down at least 3 times. For some godforsaken reason, my controller just would not let me jump. Dude. Which wasn't just fucking me over a ludicrous amount in the heat of battle, but even trying to simply get to this area. My hatred for this game and everything it stood for by here was at an absolute boiling point. Will you swing the sword? Resulting in that final blow I dished out being one of the most euphoric experiences of my life. Yes! Fuck you! Even better than Malice is the third Colossus, the Great Gaius. Located on what appears to be a flying saucer? Maybe not, but You see it, right? Being just the third Colossus, I was a bit surprised by the jump in complexity this battle took from just the first two before it, as this is not only the first Colossus that provokes you, but also one you can't just hop right onto the legs of. Though you are able to use Gaius's rage to your advantage, as you have to lure the buffoon into slamming the specific piece of the ground beneath you, causing him to chip his armor and allowing you to scale your way up to a weak spot. This was the first strong, proper challenge of the game, as it took me a while to figure out that you could even break its armor to begin with, but it got me really excited to see how the battles would continue to evolve as the game progressed. Also, at one point I was sent flying and somehow managed to still land onto Gaius's arm. Moments like that in this game are just insanely rewarding. And now we're getting into my tippy top favorite Colossi. The fifth Colossus, Avion, is easily one of the coolest Colossi in the whole game. It's a very simple fight as you first bait it over with your arrows, and then you embark in the thrill of leaping onto one of its wings as it comes soaring by at supersonic speeds. Then you find yourself holding on for dear life as Avion veers back and forward through the air as you lunge for its weak points. It's just such a spectacle. And then there's this nightmare. Durg is one of, if not the most unique battle in the game. The location's really cool, he's got a very unique design, possibly my favorite. He's incredibly hostile, and coolest of all is having to mount aggro as you simultaneously snipe this slithery bastard with your bow. It is a blood-pumping, adrenaline-rushing endeavor for sure. There's not much else to say than that, it is just phenomenal. The next Colossus is the complete opposite from Durg. Not only is Phalanx airborne, but he's also the only Colossus that's completely pacifistic. No matter how much you attack him, he never fights back. Some Colossi won't attack you till they're provoked, some Colossi will immediately go on the offensive, but Rayquaza here just minds his own business the entire time, which actually made me feel really bad when I kept yoinking him out of the sky. And then there's my personal favorite Colossus, Kuramori. Is he as big and bad as guys like Malice? No. Is he as majestic and beautiful as Avion or Phalanx? No. But this fight was actually the most exciting for me in both of my playthroughs. You have to use some stealth to get a jump on him before sniping him as he scales the temple walls while avoiding his lethal loogies. Then you gotta jump down as fast as possible and slip in as many strikes as you can before scampering back to cover and repeating the process. I just feel like this Colossus struck a perfect balance of fun, tension, and challenge without being too hot to handle. I want to make it clear that there's barely a gap between these top 4 Colossi for me in terms of which are my favorite. In fact, which one is my favorite will probably change 5 times just from the time I'm done recording and editing this video. But I think that's just a testament to how awesome this game is. When you get past the learning curve and your own incompetence, it's just really fun. And then there's the ending, and it's really depressing. After defeating the final Colossi, you're transported back to the Shrine of Worship, where you're greeted by a bunch of mysterious men with horses who you saw making their way to the Forbidden Lands a little while before this. Lord Emon? I'm gonna say Emon. Lord Emon scolds Wander for using the Forbidden Resurrection spell, as it seems Dormin has betrayed us with Mono still dead while Wander appears to be possessed by the spirits of the deceased Colossi. Emon orders Wander to be put out of his misery, and one of his men follows the order by shooting Wander in the knee.
I used to be an adventurer like you.
The man tries again by stabbing Wander through his lat? What the fuck is wrong with you? As he does this, more of that dark essence leaks out of Wander, and he begins to transform into a giant, shadowy, horny figure, claiming we Dormin have arisen anew. From there, you then play as Dormin, stomping at the shamans and breathing fire. However, they're able to escape the situation somehow, even after all of that.
Let's get out of here.
Emon then drops Wander's sword into a pool of water at the center of the shrine, ripping open a portal, check out my review, dragging Dormin into it as he slowly reverts back into a silhouette of Wander. A really sad touch here being the fact that the same music that played when you killed all the other Colossi plays here as well. No matter how much you flail though, you're not able to evade this fate, and thus Dormin is seemingly defeated once and for all, and along with him, Wander is dead as well. After all that struggle, all that fighting, the journey to get here, the ass beatings you were handed, the amount of times you fell and got back up and put your life in danger and even lost aggro to save Mono, all of it was for nothing. But then, just as it seemed like Dormin was using you and all of this was for naught, Mono opens her eyes and is reborn. She's alive. You poor Phillies fan. And then it gets even better. Aggro somehow is alive too! But then suddenly the bridge connecting the outside world to the Forbidden Lands collapses behind the shamans as they ride back to civilization, stranding Mono and Aggro here, destined to be cut off from the rest of the world for as long as they live. But that's not all, because as Mono explores her surroundings, she makes a shocking discovery. Right in the spot where Dormin and Wander were sealed away, she finds a baby with horns? Which is possibly connected to the game before this? Maybe? I don't know, man. It's just a crazy-ass ending that keeps going. And the final song, ooh, it's absolutely beautiful. Shadow of the Colossus the first time around was a brutal playthrough at times, especially the second half of the game. But I knew I needed to give it a second chance. Deep down, I just had a gut feeling that it deserved a second chance, probably because, if I was being totally honest with myself, a lot of my problems weren't because of the game, but because of my own ineptitude. Now, although I do take a lot of the blame for the way I felt, I can't bear all the blame. I still contend the controls can be rough at times, and while I vastly improved with a whole nother playthrough under my belt, I still had my fair share of trouble here and there, and I wouldn't blame anybody for being turned away from this game because of the finicky controls. But once you get past that learning curve, you're able to sit back and really take in this game for the work of art I truly believe it is. This game needs to be studied for the way it is able to make you feel so emotionally attached to characters you really know nothing about, and the reason you get so attached is because of the controls. As I've stated what feels like numerous times at this point, you feel every bit of struggle Wander is going through with each Colossus encounter. Do we know exactly what his relationship to this girl is? No, but obviously she means a great deal to him if he's willing to risk his life and trespass upon these forbidden lands to save her. And I think we all have someone in our lives we'd like to at least imagine we'd do the same thing for if they were met with the same fate as Mono. So when it turns out all his efforts were for nothing, all your efforts were for nothing, the struggle that we felt so strongly because we fought tooth and nail right there along with Wander through the controls, it really is heartbreaking. And it's a great ending in its own right if you just leave it at that, but I need to dig deeper. I have to learn more about these characters and this world. It's just way too intriguing to me. I'm sorry if this all feels disjointed and scattergunned. It's a lot to process, okay? But let's start with this. At first, initially, I didn't think Dormin was evil, at least not completely. Did Dormin take advantage of a desperate man? Yeah, he kinda did. But it's not like Dormin didn't warn him what would happen. Dormin says that Mono can be brought back to life, but at a great cost. A great cost is a bit vague, but when you're dealing with what seems like a god, that's not a condition you should take lightly. And Wander agreed to the condition nonetheless. And even after being defeated by Lord Emon and cast away once again, Dormin did keep his promise. Mono was brought back to life. He didn't have to do that. And really, he didn't even have to mention there would be a great cost to pay for all this in the first place. I mean, that's gotta make him at least somewhat honorable, right? For all we know, he could have been like, sure, whatever, she can be brought back to life, we're just gonna wipe out the whole planet anyway. Cause there has to be good reason Dormin was sealed away and had his spirit split up among the Colossi, banished, but based on what we've seen, he may not be all that bad, maybe just misunderstood. All we know is that he has the power to resurrect the dead and I guess breathe fire. And Lord Emon's tribe or whatever is vehemently against the practices of resurrection. They believe the dead are meant to stay dead. Man, they would hate Dragon Ball. Does that make all these shamans the bad guys? Again, based off of what the game itself presents us with, we really don't know. It feels like there's no true antagonist here. Everybody is very morally gray, and that's really cool. There's so much left up to your imagination, but they feed you enough clues that still allow for a very satisfying conclusion, even if they don't make for a complete one. Like I said, apparently this game acts as a sort of spiritual prequel to the game before this, Ico, with Dormin maybe being reincarnated into this horned baby who grows to be this guy from that game? I don't know. But let's just take Ico and just put it to the side for now. Let's think about what this ending for Dormin means in the context of this game. If I had to take a guess, I think this reincarnation acts not just as a rebirth for Dormin/Wander, but the Forbidden Lands as a whole. Think about how barren this place has been this entire time. It isn't until the end of the game, after these rebirths take place, that suddenly wildlife begins to flourish. So maybe whatever dark essence Dormin and the Colossi were carrying has been completely flushed out, and the Forbidden Forbidden Land slate has been wiped clean. So those were just my initial thoughts, and then I decided to do some more digging online as to what other people thought and whatever kind of crazy theories they could come up with. And that led me down a really interesting rabbit hole. In fact, I bought this for myself just to read a few months ago because I just thought it would be interesting. And now here we are, and it serves a purpose in one of my crazy, stupid videos. And if you're wondering about this, I didn't buy this just for this video. I've been using this for roleplay for years. Credit to Wheelman56 on this thread from like 20 years ago for much of this info, and much of what I'll be basing my own theories off of for the remainder of the video. This idea of his says that Dormin is based off of Nimrod from the Bible, and the similarities between them upon first reading this theory were actually pretty apparent. So for starters, Dormin is an anagram of the name Nimrod. Nimrod was a warrior king first mentioned in the book of Genesis, described as the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Legend has it Nimrod killed a bull with his bare hands and took to wearing its horns on his head as a crown. In my own research following this, I wasn't able to find any real evidence about this fight with a bull ever occurring, but let's play devil's advocate and say the fight did occur. Even then, the idea of killing a bull with your fucking bare hands sounds absolutely ridiculous. But it's also speculated in the old days of the earth, giants roamed. In Genesis chapter 6, it said there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare their children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. So with all that said, and Nimrod being such a mighty man, could he possibly have been a giant? Maybe the first giant? I don't know, but that's pretty interesting considering the parallel to Colossi, and if it's true that Nimrod was a giant, I think that may shift the odds in his favor in a battle with a bull. And with all of that in mind, it's very interesting to note that in concept art, Dormin has a bull-like figure, giving even more credence to the notion of Nimrod being inspiration for Dormin. Nimrod was also the one responsible for orchestrating the construction of the Tower of Babel upon a plain in the land of Shinar. Genesis says, "Let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name lest we be scattered abroad the face of the whole earth." As far as I understand, basically meaning that rather than spread throughout the earth, the people wanted to build a city and a tower to make a name for themselves, an arrogant monument to humanity's own greatness, and an act of defiance towards God's wishes that humanity expand and reign all over the earth. Not to mention the tower is also theorized to have been built so high in case of emergency like another world-ending flood. Building it on a plain then wouldn't really make much sense, but it's a theory nonetheless. Oh, and keep in mind, the name Nimrod translates to "we will rebel." In some respects, the castle in the center of the Forbidden Land, in the middle of the plains, could be seen as a representation of the Tower of Babel. For years, these were all just theories that people had based on the Bible. This was the best Shadow of the Colossus fans had to work with for almost 2 decades, and then it gets even more interesting. After almost 20 years of theorizing across the fandom with no real answers, a storyboard from 2004 for Shadow of the Colossus leaked in 2021, and it turns out many of these theories people were coming up with were stunningly accurate. In the world of Shadow of the Colossus, the developers differentiate time between BWE, before World Era, and WE.
We? Who's we?
Which is simply World Era, much like we differentiate time periods in our world. Around 2500 BWE, there was a great catastrophe that swept away most of the known world. It's not known exactly what happened, but it is written that this was a natural disaster. And when you consider the phrasing swept away, it's probably another flood. A few survivors naturally expanded eventually into the thousands, and many of those nomads came upon a plain in the land of Shinar. The storyboard also states there were giants in the earth in those days, who came to be known as the Colossi. They appeared biologically immortal, and their appearance reflected their environment. Many people were outraged by the Colossi's mere existence, believing that they were responsible for the great catastrophe that wiped out their world years ago. People rebelled and waged war against them and called themselves Dormin, meaning insurgent, for they were mighty hunters in the face of the gods. With each Colossus death, its blood spilled, marking the land, and its corpse became a mound of young sprouts of grass. giants, and they found that every new colossi whose blood they spilled gravitated towards the first, and so on, and the hill grew. The Dormin said, "Come and let us build a great monument from the corpses of the gods at the center of the land and make a name for ourselves, reaching the heavens, and we shall never be led astray by the gods' catastrophes." The tower they'd built was dubbed the Sky Tower, and miniature versions of it were constructed throughout the land as a way of mocking where they'd felled previous giants. With each passing kill, the Dormin became more deteriorated and stripped of their humanity. One day, it wasn't one of the slain giants that gravitated towards the Sky Tower, but the Dormin themselves did. They coalesced into one another, forming a collective entity whose likeness was of the giants they slaughtered, which made them believe that they had ascended into godhood. But there were also many humans who abstained from the slaughter, and as such, a great divide took place. People split into clans, some believing the Dormin had truly transcended godhood, while others believed this was nothing more than a curse, possessed by the spirits of the innocent creatures slain. These people were known as the clans of the ancients. Hundreds of years later, a great war broke out between the opposing sides, with the clans of the ancients prevailing. The Dormin had remained neutral up until this point, but the ancients used magic their ancestors had drawn from the Colossi to cast away the Dormin themselves. The Dormin's essence was sucked from its vessel, rendering it powerless. That power was then split between 24 great idols, attached to both these statues and the remaining Colossi, corrupting them with Dormin's power. With Dormin's power dispersed, and considering the troubled history of bloodshed throughout these lands, the area was strictly forbidden, never meant to be entered again. So granted, there are some things in there that aren't true to the final version of the game, probably the biggest thing being that there were originally 24 Colossi and we ended up with 16. But I really don't think the amount of Colossi matters that much in a story perspective. They clearly told the story that they still intended to. Yeah, it's a lot to process, a lot to take in. But it's a great story. Shadow of the Colossus is concrete proof that video games can be just as much an art form as any other forms of media. It might be a pain in the fucking ass the first go around or two you have with it, but I think it's essential that you at least try it out. Maybe you don't like it your first playthrough and you want to just drop it after that. That's cool. Not everything is for everyone, but who knows? Maybe with some more time to adjust, you might end up falling in love with what you find. Except Spyro 3, that still sucks. Wander and his horse Agro venturing through the night towards the Forbidden Lands.